kick off this hour with trade wars because Simon Harris is among the group of EU finance ministers meeting to discuss Donald Trump's latest tariff threat. The Cabinet will also be talking about the potential ramifications for Ireland if it happens. The US President claims he will 100% go ahead with imposing extra tariffs on European countries opposed to his plans to take over Greenland. And Donald Trump insists Denmark cannot protect the territory.
We have to have it. They have to have this done. They can't protect it. Denmark, they're wonderful people. And I know the leaders are very good people, but they don't even go there.
Donald Trump there. Larry Donnelly, the columnist and law lecturer at the University of Galway, is with us now. Larry, thanks very much for joining me.
Great to be with you, Alan.
Just how serious, Larry, is this moment in EU-US relations? I mean, is it the most serious in the post-World War II international order era, or what could very soon be the previous international order era?
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. It is gravely serious. This purported, de facto taking of NATO territory would mark the real end of the NATO alliance and would forever alter the transatlantic relationship, which I think has been a cornerstone of world affairs and global relations for the past number of decades. And the impact of that in a whole host of different fronts is immeasurable. And perhaps the one thing to note amidst all of this is as Europe and as the United States, distance themselves from one another, the only two parties here who have big smiles on their face are Russia and China.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And, it seems extraordinary for a US president to be openly discussing annexing territory belonging to a NATO ally. And Trump has refused to rule out the use of force, Larry. I mean, how does that sit with international law and NATO's collective defence principles? And surely someone within the Trump administration, or maybe this is a faint hope, has mentioned to Donald Trump that previously NATO really has only been used to come to the defence of US interests, and Denmark themselves amongst the countries who have provided support to the US, be it in Afghanistan and other locations.
Yeah, well, as mentioned, it flips the world order on its head. And to your question as to whether someone can talk some sense into Trump, that's the ultimate question. We know from, a lot of reportage that there are very many Republican elected officials in Washington, D.C. and around the country who are privately furious with Donald Trump, yet deeply wary of crossing him because he continues to enjoy the support, the steadfast support of very many grassroots conservatives in the United States, who those elected officials are going to depend on for support ahead of the midterm elections. But here is the thing, and amidst the broader electorate, virtually all of this agenda, this foreign policy agenda, is deeply, deeply unpopular. So if Trump goes ahead with this, he seems to be acting without any regard for political realities. He seems to be acting out of his own sense, as he has said, the only limit on his behavior is his own morality. And it seems to be this avaricious desire to expand the territory and influence of the United States. And again, that runs directly afoul of the America First inward-looking premise that he spouted many times in the campaign trail last year, and which effectively won him the White House. So where this all leads for Donald Trump is a mystery. Where it all leads for the world is a mystery. But what we can say, I think definitively, is that Donald Trump is not acting right now out of any sense of rationality, political or otherwise.
I suppose, Larry, as you say, it's those who voted for Trump on the back of America First might not be happy with the way things are playing out. But to what extent is all this noise around Greenland and the tariff threats as well, which we'll get to in just a little while, really about? Is it, do you sense or suspect, about Donald Trump trying to deflect from other matters? I mean, the more we've been talking about all these issues, the less talk there's been about the Epstein files and his lack of addressing the cost of living crisis back in America? Or is it more about if and when he does eventually, his tenure as a US president is over, that he has some sort of legacy that he can point to and say, well, look what I did in Venezuela, I annexed Greenland, and God knows where else he may have potentially claimed over the next 3 years?
Yeah, I think it's probably a mixture of all of the above, Alan. I think, look, it is a fact that we're not talking about the Epstein files. I think a lot of Americans are going to start to say, look, if he's so desperate to distract on the Epstein files, what actually is in there? We know what we've seen so far has been heavily redacted. My own suspicion has been if there was a smoking gun implicating Donald Trump, we would have known about it already, given how Washington, D.C. leaks. But at any rate, he seems determined to distract attention from that. When it comes to the cost of living crisis, and here is, again, political reality, while Trump's support base is with him, and which is extraordinary in and of itself, the fact is that very many Americans are turning on Donald Trump on the economy. His numbers on the economy are underwater. The perceptions of the economy in the United States are very, very bad, which, again, will be a crucial consideration ahead of the midterm elections. And even though he might be distracting attention, Americans fundamentally don't pay a huge amount to what's going on beyond the borders of the United States. They will be razor-like focused on the costs of goods and services, gas and groceries, the famous, items that Americans need, and they are still very, very high. And despite his promises to fix the situation, it hasn't improved by and large. It's still afflicting very many Americans. So that's why I say one would have to wonder if all of Trump's behavior is none of it is shaped whatsoever by political considerations. And if that's the case, to my way of thinking at least, it might be the first time in the history of the American presidency where a president, frankly, just didn't care at all about the political ramifications of what he's doing. And that makes it further scary because, who knows what he's capable of. And beforehand, we might have said, pay attention to his bark, pay attention to his bite, not necessarily his bark. But I think what he did in Venezuela changed the equation there because he did actually act upon a threat. And who knows whether he'll be willing to do so with Greenland.
He does say he will go ahead, 100% go ahead with these, imposing these extra tariffs if these European countries continue to oppose his plans to take over Greenland. And I suppose, Larry, look, we're seeing tariffs being used almost as a form of coercion or punishment. France has described this as blackmail. Does that description hold up to you?
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to see it as anything else. And remember, there is already, 15% tariffs. They agreed upon all of this at his golf club in Scotland. Presumably, these tariffs would be in addition to that 15% figure. And were that to happen, and again, here's why I say you'd have to think Trump is acting with no regard whatsoever for politics. Because if this happens, Europe will strike back and will have something of a trade war, with again, midterm elections coming up. And that will do nothing but provoke chaos at every level. We've already seen the markets have taken a very severe hit. The dollar has tanked since Trump made this announcement. And the price of goods and services that many Americans enjoy on a daily basis will skyrocket if Europe strikes back in terms of a trade war. All of this ahead of midterm elections. None of it can be good for Trump's fellow Republicans who are seeking to be elected for the first time or seeking re-election. And again, it brings up the question. It appears that Trump just doesn't care. It looks to be that perhaps he wants to have this historical role and historical legacy as president, and that trumps everything else. But just how positive a legacy that will be, I think, is very, very dubious. I think if he thinks that his moves and his expansionism are going to carve out a really solid place for him in the history books, I think he is sorely mistaken.
Yeah, if the EU revives that 93 billion in retaliatory tariffs, I think the fireworks are really going to go off. And the EU has the powerful but rarely used anti-coercion instrument. How they've been careful, I suppose, up to this point, Larry, including ourselves here in Ireland, in terms of how we've commented on what's been happening. But we've been backed into a corner. I mean, how significant would it be if Brussels decided to deploy it? And perhaps they would look at it as maybe the EU need to change how the EU is viewed as a global economic and political actor. As a market, we are bigger than the US, a bigger population as well. But maybe all of that has been lost in what's been happening recently.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're at, this would be a crossing the Rubicon moment. If Trump takes Greenland and or implements these sky high tariffs, then the prudence or the caution that Europe has adopted, and indeed Ireland has adopted very much with respect to Donald Trump's words and deeds, then I think that all has to go out the window. Europe, as you say, will be backed into a corner and has to act affirmatively, and has to act with strength, and has to act with resolve. There is no other choice if we are put into this position. That simply cannot be allowed to go ahead. The United States moving on Greenland is an unfathomable move. Again, it would tear up NATO. It would really, in terms of the world, in terms of cohesion, it would have devastating consequences. And as such, come what may, and of course the consequences could be bad for all of us, but come what may, Europe in that event will have no option whatsoever but to row back and to institute, as it's been called, this bazooka, this anti-coercive practices measure against the United States. And as I say, that will put us in a position of an ongoing de facto trade war with the United States, which, of course, the United States is, a bigger economy, all of that, but Europe is strong too. And nobody will win out of that. But in the event that Trump moves on Greenland, Europe has no choice.
There is, of course, and it is going to be really interesting to see what potentially comes out of the major diplomatic effort underway at the World Economic Forum in Davos. I mean, realistically, Larry, can European leaders still steer Trump away from escalation? Because he does have previous in terms of accepting engagement only to double down later, and perhaps could Europe be misreading him again?
Well, look, there are certain instances in which Trump has backed down. Do you remember when he, was basically saying that he was going to turn Gaza into the new Riviera? And in the wake of fierce opposition from Arab states backed up by Europe, he walked away from that plan. I remain optimistic, and again, Donald Trump has a bad habit of proving me wrong, but I remain optimistic that sense can prevail and that the sense will be tried to be displayed to him in Davos by European leaders. I would have front and center in that discussion. I would have the European leaders who Donald Trump actually trusts and likes and is on roughly the same political page as. So, for instance, Giorgia Meloni of Italy would be somebody who I would hope could speak some sense to Donald Trump. But also, there are figures within his orbit who I deep down know that this is a terrible idea at every level. There are other figures in his orbit like J.D. Vance who take a very anti-European attitude, who no doubt are advocating this course of action. It depends who might be able to prevail upon Donald Trump, and it depends ultimately what his calculus will be. We know he's unpredictable. We know he's capable of just about anything, as Venezuela has demonstrated. So there's a great deal of uncertainty around this, but we really are in hope and pray territory. This would be devastating if Trump moved on Greenland, devastating at every level, as I've outlined.
And of course, Ireland has stressed calm and dialogue, but also preparing for all eventualities. And I guess, as I mentioned earlier on, Larry, in terms of exposure, would it be fair to say we're possibly the most exposed, certainly economically, if a full trade war were to erupt?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you took the words out of my mouth. I do believe that we are potentially the most exposed in all of this. And all of this is dangerous. We also know that up until now, in the weeks and months leading up to all of this, we know that, again, there are a number of figures in Donald Trump's orbit who have Ireland in their targets, whether that's around foreign direct investment, whether it's around the undersea cables that, I suppose, propel financial transactions around the world that we don't have the capacity to defend, whether it's around our attitude towards what's happened in Gaza, the Occupied Territories Bill, et cetera. They already have their sights set on us, which is worrying in and of itself. In the event that Ireland, as it will have to, will row in with Europe in support of retaliatory measures against the Trump administration, we are potentially very, very seriously exposed. And we should not underestimate how much difficulty that could cause us because of an economic model, which, let's not make any mistakes about it, it has been very good for this country, but it has left us very reliant upon the United States. And indeed, as I keep saying in the context of the Occupied Territories Bill, it means that the most rich, the most wealthy sector of our economy is actually not governed by Irish law. It is governed by the law of the United States. And that all is a lethal cocktail in the current context. That's why I say, and I don't mean to be overly dramatic about it, right now we are in hope and pray territory.
Yeah, these are very, very strange times. But Larry, always great to get your perspective on these matters. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks, Alan.
That's Larry Donnelly there, columnist and law lecturer at the University of Galway.